Hi, everybody. Welcome this morning. I guess it's this morning for me. I'm from Calgary, Canada, so it's 8 a.m. Calgary time. So I know it's later in the day for lots of you over in Europe as well. So I'm Tracy Luca-Huger. I'm the Director of Partnership Networks with Mentor Canada. We are a collective impact initiative, and we have just changed our name to Mentor Canada. We have just signed an alliance agreement with Mentor in the USA. So I know that there is lots of connection to that organization as well. So I'm just thrilled to be here. I'm going to hand it to you, Dan, to introduce yourself, and then we'll get started.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dan Horgan, CEO of Collabl, and have a long history with mentoring. So just for context, I served on the Mentor USA Pittsburgh Affiliates Board for 7 years as I was getting started in my career. I launched a nonprofit when I was 18 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and continued to support Mentor USA throughout the majority of my career, including when I worked in social impact at Capital One, managing our corporate giving and employee engagement work, and then served on staff, helping them to build out their corporate partnership portfolio, which is when I started to meet the amazing team in Mentor Canada and have continued to work with them in building out private sector partnerships as well. So really excited to be with all of you today and share some of the lessons learned along our way, and then also learn from you as well.
So today we're going to walk you through a little bit more about Mentor Canada, an overview of our Power of Mentoring campaign that Dan and I have been hosting and facilitating for almost 9 months now. And we will dive into increasing private sector engagement, corporate engagement, and look at some ways to virtually engage both youth as well as private sector employees. The day that we're in right now, it's all about virtual, but there are opportunities as well to look at some of the in-person opportunities through this event as well. And then we'll have some question and answers. You'll have some breakout group work as well, like you have in other sessions. And yeah, that should take up our time today.
And I just want to jump in and say, if you have questions or things that you want us to dive into deeper as we go throughout the session, feel free to just share that in the chat box, and Tracy and I will try to integrate those questions as we go as well.
So at Mentor Canada, we are committed in a Canadian context to expanding access to mentoring for every young person to meet their potential. So not only are we looking at increasing the quality of mentoring opportunities for young people, but we are wanting to bridge more opportunities for youth anywhere between the ages of 6 and 25 to actually have access to formal and informal mentors across the country. So we are not a service delivery organization. We do not run programs. We are a sector support and a backbone organization for service delivery organizations to increase their quality of programming, but also increasing opportunities for them to connect more young people to mentors within their context. So we have 4 pillars that we use. We have a research pillar where we are conducting research in Canada around the experiences of young people in having mentors, formal and informal, looking at the quality mentoring relationships that do exist in Canada and both those experiences, and then looking at where mentoring services don't exist within Canada and how we can start to bridge that so that more young people can have access in rural and remote communities. We want to look at building sector capacity through technology. So certainly given our era of COVID right now, technology is a key cornerstone to delivering mentoring programs, but also a resource for young people to not only build out their networks and social connections, but to also facilitate relationships and looking at how mentoring programs can further develop their service delivery through virtual mentoring opportunities. My portfolio is partnerships, so building partnerships both with government, private sector, not-for-profits, charities, foundations within our sector. So really all looking at mentoring as the core focus through a collective impact lens, how we can all contribute to increasing those opportunities for youth in Canada. And then building out awareness campaigns, looking at recruiting more mentors. How do we become a gateway so that more mentors and individuals in Canada will engage in opportunities to mentor, both formally and informally, with young people in our country? Next slide, Dan. So part of our strategy with Mentor Canada was to look at those connections for young people. I think did you move ahead? I think we have to go, that's okay. So with that opportunity, it was really important for us to look at ways for young people to connect, certainly those young people between the ages of 18 and 25, to connect with individuals around career connections and career pathways. We know, and I know that we are speaking to an audience that truly believes in the power of mentoring. So we know that mentoring relationships, both formal and informal, are powerful. They change perspectives, they increase opportunities, they strengthen communities, but more than anything, they also connect young people and build out their social networks, their support networks, and build social capital for them. And we know that many young people who are coming into mentoring opportunities and relationships, that they don't have those networks and they don't have those opportunities. They don't have somebody necessarily in their world and in their environment that can help to bridge them to career opportunities, but also to broaden their perspective. And so through the Power of Mentoring campaign, we looked to our partners in the US through Mentor USA, who had launched a campaign several years ago called 10,000 Connections, where they wanted to bridge opportunities for private sector employees to start to engage in conversations with young people and build career opportunities for them around pathways, building out branding, looking at different career opportunities for themselves. And so in Canada, we used and leveraged that campaign to build out Power of Mentoring. And so our campaign is what we're calling Power of Mentoring. We know that those young people in Canada and certainly globally that are disconnected and aren't connected to training, employment, or opportunities really do need those relationships and those connections. And if we can start to bridge those through a formal facilitated opportunity, that we know that those conversations and those connections can continue. So our Power of Mentoring campaign, I'm going to ask you to go to the next slide, Dan. So the Power of the Power of Mentoring campaign started as an in-person event. And they were intended to be in-person events in local communities where we could bridge private sector employees and local companies to youth in their communities. And so through a facilitated event in one evening where we would have employees come out and bridge that with young people. However, we had the opportunity to host one in person in one center, and then COVID hit. So Dan and I went away, took that away and said, how can we look at bridging and connecting still virtually with young people? We know that during COVID and during these times of isolation, that young people were really wanting to make connections, but didn't have that opportunity to do that in their community. We also heard from corporate employees and businesses that they still wanted to have their employees engage, and they wanted to have those opportunities to give back to their community and still connect with young people. And so Dan and I decided that we would take this virtual, that we would use a Zoom platform, and that we would continue to look at virtual opportunities for young people and for mentors. So what this did, though, through corporate engagement was that it still allowed those opportunities for their employees while they were physically not in the office to engage in volunteerism. It allowed them still to connect with young people through a facilitated means. It had low lift and continues to have low lift. So what that means for us is that it really is turnkey. Mentor Canada provides a turnkey event where corporate employees engage, but they don't have to facilitate it. Their commitment is to recruit and share our messaging so that employees can sign up. It's inclusive participation. So what it allows for are young people from across our country, not in specific locations, and employees from across the country to connect through a virtual platform and through a virtual event. It aligns to their corporate responsibility strategies. And so that was a really important piece, is to look at how mentoring opportunities, but also through these events, how it aligns with that corporate giving, that community investment that businesses and corporations are interested in, but allows them during this time of physical and social distancing to still mobilize those strategies and still have their employees engaged and make a difference in their community. So the feedback that we have received is that it still continues to have huge impact, both for their employees, both for the company, but also bridging those connections for young people to look at recruitment into their businesses, but also to look at those career conversations and act as gateways to formal mentoring opportunities. So what we mean by that is that we're offering an opportunity for employees to engage in a 90-minute experience with young people across the country. What it does do, though, is after that opportunity, that those mentors that are engaging can either sign up with a formal mentoring program or continue those conversations and those connections with young people through LinkedIn. So that we're seen as a gateway and a launching place, not the final destination for those connections and those opportunities for young people and for corporate employees. So our in-person events, when we held them in person, they were a one format learning with leader opportunity where young people would have the opportunity to engage in 3 different conversations with corporate sector employees and actually leave that physical in-person event with 3 new connections. Now we know through our virtual opportunities that we could have different formats. And so what we decided to do was to look at 4 different virtual events and 4 different virtual pathways. One being pathways and perspectives, where we would facilitate a panel discussion based on one corporation or one business sector, where we would interview and facilitate a panel discussion with young people to engage them in understanding that business, that line of work, or with that one specific corporation, to get an understanding for those young people of different pathways and different perspectives that they could embark on for their careers. Learning with leaders is really the closest model to our in-person events, where we connect young people to individual breakout rooms with corporate employees to really explore personal branding. They look at career pathways. So they actually make those individual connections and they engage in those conversations with those employees through breakout rooms. So we will do 2 or 3 rounds of those small group conversations with employees and with young people, and really allow them to make those connections from across Canada. The third format is focus connections. So these are themed fireside chats where we will engage senior leadership or career-specific employees in an intimate conversation so that young people and young leaders from across the country can actually have conversations with a vice president, with a CEO, with someone in a leadership position within a company where they may not have access to that individual, to really explore a career, look at what that corporation or that business has to offer, have discussion about career pathways into that specific career, into that business, so that they could understand how they can get a gateway, how they could engage in those conversations, or how they can engage potentially and make themselves a candidate for discussions and looking at a career within that corporation. Skill builders. So we're looking at skill builder opportunities where young people can actually look at how to go into an interview, the skills, how to present themselves, how to build out a resume, how to build a personal brand, looking at a LinkedIn profile. So these individual young people will work with subject matter experts through our facilitated event to actually gain skills and learn from those seniored subject matter experts in a specific corporation or in a variety of corporations so that they can make those connections. Dan, I'm going to hand it to you. Certainly you are a bit more eloquent in going through those formats, but I'll hand it to you to further exemplify those.
No, it was great. So two quick things I wanted to share with everybody. One is you'll have Tracy and my contact information, which will be at the end of this deck as well. If you are interested in seeing videos of any of these events in action, we can share with you a few videos. One that we did in Edmonton that Tracy referenced as the kickoff event for Power of Mentoring in Canada. And then we produced a number of these videos in the US as well. We always find it helpful. Sometimes you can explain the event, but to see the event in action, see kind of how the mentors and the young leaders are interacting with each other can also just be helpful when you're trying to sell it to others in your particular region or get other people on board with the concept. So definitely email us and we'll be happy to send you those links. So I'm going to share with you a few things that we've done in terms of virtual event management. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But if you want me to dig into any of them in more detail, I'm happy to do that. And then we're also happy to share examples of these things if that's helpful in terms of building out your templates or building out the resources that you can use for your events. So just a couple of quick things that I would call out from our experience. And this is coming from the work that I did in the US with 10,000 Connections and then also the Power of Mentoring experience in Canada. Streamlining the online registration process is an added value to many of the companies that you work with. Some of those companies will want to register their employees through their own internal volunteer system. But what we find is in many cases, it's easier for you just to manage the online registration and then send them at the end a roster of all of those employees that have registered for the event. It also gives you as the event organizer greater insight and sort of managing to the event. So making sure that your ratios of mentors that are being recruited from your private sector partners to the young people being recruited through your programs are sort of in balance. And you can flag anything along the way where you might have way more mentors than young people or vice versa. So we always recommend trying to streamline it and do the online registration process yourself so that you can manage more effectively up to the event day. The second is, we don't do, since these are one-time events, any sort of pre-event training for mentors. There's been a few cases where the organizations that we've worked with have asked for that, and we'll jump on a 15 to 30-minute phone call and walk the mentors through what the experience is going to look like logistically, as well as some tips and suggestions to consider coming into the experience. But in addition to that, we provide a tip sheet that we've put together which is basically a one-pager for all of the mentors and all of the young leaders that are going to participate in the event. For the young leaders, the primary focus is on, these are some key questions to consider before you come into this experience so that you can come in thinking about what are you most curious about, given the context of who you're meeting with, what type of information would you be asking them about or seeking out from their experience? How can you jumpstart the conversation when you're connecting with them? For the mentors, I always say the tip sheet boils down to one key, most important point, which is meet these young leaders where they are. As many mentors, well-intentioned and excited to connect with young leaders, will self-admit, they'll sort of jump into the experience and kick off and be like, so Tracy, tell me what your goals are. And as a young leader who maybe hasn't had a great experience in the past building relationships with adults, or maybe hasn't had much experience in a professional setting, without having any sort of connection or even knowing anything about that mentor, that can be really off-putting. And so encouraging the mentors to just get to know each other first, beyond your title, beyond your role, who are you and sort of what are some of the things you're interested in, and what have you been up to lately? Some of those casual conversations create a sense of trust and a sense of a more relaxed, informal tone, which can really help when you move into the conversations about career pathways or trying to figure out how to get from where you are today to where you want to be in your career. The conversation guide complements the tip sheets. So you just imagine for many people, regardless of their age or experience, walking into a room of say 100 people pre-COVID and being told, go network with people, that can be really scary and intimidating. And so what we try to do is we try to take all that away and facilitate an experience that's comfortable, still challenging, which is good for growth, but really engages people in a meaningful way. So the conversation guide is essentially a framework that we provide to all the mentors and to all the young leaders to help them think about, you have 25 to 30 minutes in these small group discussions, how do you want to structure your time? So we divided the conversation into 3 different segments. We give them sample questions that they can use as a jumpstart for their conversations as well. And then we always wrap up with some final action calls to action. So if you really felt connected, you might want to connect on LinkedIn. You might want to exchange email addresses. You might want to follow up with a more in-depth informational interview. That, again, is a way to take the conversation to the next level from where you started. A couple last things I would just share would be event reminders. We always send out about a week or so in advance an overview of all the logistics, encouraging them to, again, check their calendar invite with the Zoom link for the session, the logistics around joining us on video. For young leaders, we encourage them to give us their best professional look as they're networking, similar to what they would be doing in an in-person experience. And we also sort of walk them through the agenda. We give them an overview of who the participants are. So who are these mentors that you're going to be meeting with? If we've collected LinkedIn profiles for any of the mentors, we share those in advance so that the young leaders have a chance to research or at least learn a little bit more about who these folks are and how they can come prepared with questions. Same thing with the mentors. We make sure we share context on the organizations or the programs that the young leaders are being recruited from so that they kind of understand what types of programming or activities that young leaders have been engaged in. And then the resources are always included in the reminder, which is the tip sheet and the conversation guide. We have found, and maybe we over-engineer this, but I always find that if you send out another reminder the day of, especially for the young leaders, and then about an hour before the event, I do a quick email one-liner that just says, super excited to see you in an hour for our Power of Mentoring event. And again, it's just another way to keep this front and center in a time where all of us are trying to sort of navigate and manage a lot. The post-event resource sharing is where after the event, we send out an email with all the slides from any of the materials covered, in addition to tips on virtual networking and informational interviews. And that's where, again, we're encouraging the young leaders, if they felt a good connection to one of the mentors they met, follow up, ask for a 20, 30-minute informational interview. We give them the resource guide on how to prepare for those informational interviews, and then a bank of about 200 questions organized by themes so that they can think about what are the 2 or 3 questions that you might want to ask in that informational interview. And the main reason there is, a lot of times, even when we've been facilitating some Power of Mentoring events globally, we find that, we always tell young people to follow up, and we always tell them to, reach out and ask for another conversation or connect to somebody else in that person's network. But we don't always give them the tools on how to do that effectively, especially in this virtual space. So those resources are really invaluable for all of the young leaders. And then the event debrief is an opportunity to connect with your company partners or your community partners and just ask them how the experience was, what they would like to do differently next time. It's another way of cultivating the relationship and thinking about how you take each of these events further down the step of building a really solid relationship with that partner to do more programming, to get them more engaged within the mentoring space.
I just wanted to add 2 things. I think what we have found is most critical in preparing your corporate employees to become first-time sort of mentors and engage with young people, because some of them, this might be their first time, is those pre-read resources, both for young people and for those mentors. It gives them those tools and gives them a kit to lean on. If they're starting to struggle, they can just walk through the guide. And so we do know that everyone reads those and that they are leaning on them and looking at them pre-session. And then the post resources, because we know we've built momentum during that session, that 90-minute experience, and young people are really benefiting from resources following up, how to engage other mentors. So some of those post resources are really critical for those young people to continue those conversations and to continue looking at networks and how they can continue conversations around their career development.
All right, awesome. Thanks, everyone. All right, so I'm going to dive in here. I'm going to give you my roadmap, just again for context. So by way of my background. So as I mentioned, I started a nonprofit when I was 18, had the opportunity to serve on the national board with America's Promise, which was part of retired General Colin Powell's initiative, working at national to local across the US and really empowering young people to step up and take on leadership roles. I pivoted then and continued to work in nonprofit as an executive director before moving into corporate and running corporate social responsibility. And then working in partnership with Mentor in the US and Mentor Canada, had the opportunity to build these cross-sector partnerships. And through all of that experience, what you see in front of you is what I would identify as the roadmap to success when thinking about building these partnerships with the private sector, with employers within any region. A lot of the companies that I've had the opportunity to work with are now thinking about how they can scale these programs in a global space as well. So we've been doing some testing and learning in there to see kind of how do these events translate in different markets, and both with employees as well as with different service providers. The very first step that I always emphasize is what we call define the give and get priorities. The simplest way of explaining this is lead with what you have to give. So really think about, as an organization and as a leader, like, what is the value add that you can bring to the private sector partners that you are interested in building relationships with? If you can get really concrete in understanding what their business priorities are and what their objectives are, and aligned it with your mission, it's easier to start to think about, like, what's the value that you can bring them, right? So a company may be looking to increase their customer base. Well, maybe you have a different network as an organization that you can be bringing to them to raise awareness or exposure to their organization. Maybe they're looking to diversify their workplace, and you are working with young leaders 16 to 24 looking for jobs, looking for opportunities to get into employment. So again, the value that you can bring is introduce them to that diverse young talent. But starting with what you can give versus what you want or need is the key point in this very first step of the map. When we lead with what we want, it comes across as being very one-directional in the way that you're trying to build a transaction versus a relationship. Relationship being value-driven and being focused on giving. Ultimately, you will get to the get, but you have to start with the value that you can bring to the partner that you're trying to cultivate. And again, just think about it, if you think about it in a personal sense, right? People that you're drawn to are often people who add value to you. And then it sparks your curiosity, right? Like, oh, somebody helped me out, or somebody gave me information or a tip. Oh, like, I want to return the favor. I want to help them out in return. That's sort of the human instinct. And so again, if we lead with giving, it creates that spark, which you can fuel into a relationship, which is the second point. So prioritizing the target relationships, I always say, from my experience working with a lot of different nonprofit organizations, is I often see the throwing spaghetti on the wall format. Like, we're going to put it out there what we need, and we're going to hope every company responds, and whoever calls us, we're going to react to. Versus the opposite, which is zoom in really close to your own organization and think about who are the most targeted, prioritized companies. What's your list of 5 to 7 companies that you're not currently working with that you want to be working with for a variety of reasons, because you feel like you can add value and they in turn can deliver back to you? The way that I recommend doing that is a couple of things. One is, Tracy mentioned corporate giving alignment. Look at their corporate social responsibility, their corporate foundation, their social impact mission. There's all these different words that people are using these days. So think about, what is their mission and what is it that they're publicly stating as their priorities? That's one. That's the most traditional. 2 is look for industry alignment. So industry alignment would be a school district and a vendor relationship that provides the school supplies or the books, the reading material to the school. How can the school partner with the vendor to facilitate mentorship programming with the employees from that vendor company? So the industry alignment is, there's already a synergy because we're doing business together as a customer or a B2B, a business-to-business partner. Now we're looking at taking it to the next level and deepening that relationship. Employee engagement is Globally, when you look at studies from Deloitte, McKinsey, PricewaterhouseCoopers, employee engagement is definitely a higher and higher priority, especially with younger talent, who's demanding of the company to say, what is the purpose? What are you doing to give back to the communities in which we operate or the communities in which we impact through our products and services? And so thinking about how can you offer those meaningful employee engagement experiences can add value to that company who's looking to drive up levels of satisfaction, level overall morale among their employees, the overall retention rate of those individuals as well. I want to go back to something that Tracy mentioned early on when we talk about power of mentoring and being the gateway to mentoring, right? A lot of times when I ran the 10,000 Connections campaign in the States, a lot of times I would get criticism of people saying, look, you're just running a bunch of one-time events. These aren't actually helping change the situation for these young people longer term. And I liken it to an individual that you come in contact with that you're trying to cultivate as a donor. Most people in development will not go from never having a relationship to the first meeting saying, so you would like to write a check for $1 million to support our cause, right? There's a point of cultivation. There's the stepping stone approach that you go in and you say, any donation would be fantastic to really support and drive forward our mission. And you see where they come in so that you can meet them where they are. And then you have a stewardship plan to say, okay, you came in at $25. Now we want to get you to $50 and then to $100. And then we're going to continue to cultivate and steward the relationship over time. The same is true with mentorship from my experience and perspective. Most people, if you're asking for a formal structured mentorship commitment, are not going to go from 0 to 180 overnight. But if you create the mindset shift that they can do mentorship, that they are capable of it, that they enjoy it, they find value in it, they're more likely to say, after going to a one-time Power of Mentoring event, what can I do more? How else can I support these young people? What programs can I connect to? I mean, Tracy and I in Canada in the last 9 months, we've had mentors, almost all these companies that we're working with, that will write us afterwards and say, this was fantastic, or they'll reach out to us on LinkedIn and say, how do I connect to other programs or other opportunities? I want to do this more. Some of them just come back for multiple events. They want to see what the experience is like each time, which again is just part of the cultivation experience. Other things to consider in terms of target relationships is the workforce piece. Diversifying workforce for a lot of global companies especially is a top priority. And so really thinking about how mentorship can help open doors, not just for the young leaders in terms of employment, but what I often talk about is if most 50+% of employee referrals are coming from those people's networks. And we also complain that most referrals from employees are not diverse. So if we can diversify the networks of employees through these experiences by introducing them to young people that they would have never met otherwise, the chances of them referring these young people are higher because now they have a more diverse network and they have a window into what opportunities might be aligned to that young person's career interests. So again, targeting these relationships is being much more focused versus just saying we're looking for any company that's willing to give us money or any company that just wants to put our logo on everything. Those companies may come and go, and it's great when, out of nowhere they show up. But most of the time, those companies are not sticky. They're not going to be sustainable partners. It's going to feel very transactional versus building out the actual relationship. Making the connection is just the third step. 3 quick things I would just share here is leverage your existing relationships, your board members, your staff, your donors, your existing mentors. Ask them to reach out to their network. At Collabl, just to give you an example, this summer, with a lot of summer internships canceled, we created a virtual internship experience. Within about 3 to 4 weeks, we had 300 employee volunteers recruited because we did a cascading recruitment model where we recruited a small team and then we asked them to recruit from their network and then that new network to recruit from theirs. So it's the sort of one-to-one person with a name asking a person with a name to step forward and to join them. can be really influential in the recruitment process of getting the company on board. The second thing I would just highlight here in terms of making connections is identifying multiple champions. Don't put all of your effort into just the one person that you know within a company. Really leverage that relationship that you have with one person to build out relationships with multiple people at different functions, different levels, and different geographies. Because it's that champion team that will sustain your partnership when one person leaves or one person transitions to a new role. And so thinking about it from the context of making connections, not just singularly, but in multiple champion fashion is really helpful. A couple of quick things I'll just share too is balancing teaching and learning. So number one, learn their business model. When I work with companies, I try to learn as much as I can by reading their websites, reading about their business priorities in their investor reports. I try to identify what are they talking about in their social media channels so that I know that's most likely what they care most about because that's what they're amplifying externally. And then I try to incorporate some of that language into what we're doing with them. So it feels aligned and connected versus, oh, we're this nonprofit over here and you're this corporation over here and we have very different worlds. The closer you can bring those worlds together and to see a common vision, the more likely you are to spark the connection and really get the momentum going of the relationship. And then the second part in balancing teaching and learning is share your goals and share where you're falling short. Hardest thing I often encounter with a lot of nonprofit leaders is the transparency of where you are not happy. So where you're not achieving the things that you want to be achieving. When we don't share those things, we don't give our partners, the relationships that we're trying to build, an opportunity to join us and to add value in return in the relationship. Just like we want to add value to them, intrinsically, they want to add value to us too. And so when we talk about all the great things we're doing and never talk about the things that we're struggling with, they just think everything's fine. And they're going to move on to those partners where they can feel like they can make a bigger impact. So show them how you can go from where you are to the next stage, but what's keeping you back, what's holding you down from accelerating to that ultimate goal. That's the spirit of balancing teaching and learning and ensuring a consistency from an executive director to a board member to a volunteer. Make sure there's consistency in the messaging that everybody is saying, what are the top priorities? Because when partners talk to multiple people and they hear all sorts of different things, it becomes confusing and it seems like there's not alignment around what it is that the organization is trying to achieve, which is a red flag. Coming from my work at Capital One and corporate grant making, it's a red flag when everybody's telling a different story because you want people to be moving in the same direction towards the same goal. Initiating the engagement, a couple tips here I would just share is really focus on low to high effort. What I love about the power of mentoring and these events is it's low effort. It's 60 to 90 minutes. We're asking for a small, we've done them as small as 10 employee volunteers with 10 young leaders. Really, really low lift for a company to step up and do that, but really an opportunity to sort of cultivate and build the relationship longer term so that maybe they develop their own internal mentorship program to be able to reach more young people to help you scale the number of mentors that are within your region. The other thing I would say here in terms of initiate engagement is get the senior leaders. Tracy mentioned the panel discussions and the focused connections with senior leaders. So important to get the senior leaders engaged early on. They can become some of your best champions in removing some of the red tape, some of the obstacles that can come into play with these partnerships, because they can talk about their own personal experience. Even if it's join us for 15 minutes for an opening discussion before we dive into our breakout rooms, can again be 15 minutes well worth a facilitated discussion that leads to something greater. The last part is just expanding engagement, the sixth step. This is where I always say it's the mind and the heart. It's the data and the stories. So being able to say, here's the data of how many people we've recruited and engaged, and here are the stories of impact. You know, you can say we've recruited hundreds of young leaders, and then to follow that immediately by saying, and Peace, who joined us for 3 of our events this summer, now has a job because of her attendance in this program, is a very different part of the experience for the partner that you're trying to cultivate. elevate those partners whenever and however you can. So after the event, before the event, during the event, taking pictures, showcasing them on LinkedIn, spotlighting the people, not just the brand. Who were the people that really made that event possible or made that partnership possible? What is it you value most about those people that are your champions is another deposit in the relationship that helps you just keep that stewarding that relationship over time. So expanding engagement requires that level of investment in how you elevate and celebrate the work that you're doing together. So again, just some tips and suggestions when you think about this roadmap for cultivating and deepening these relationships. Quickly, just want to highlight something. I always say this expression, awareness drives action. And what I think important is, as a nonprofit organization, we sometimes say, like, we just don't have resources or the capacity to do this work around marketing or communications. But the reality is, great communications work can actually help open doors to so much opportunity, so many different partnerships with organizations. And so what you see here is what's called the peso model. And it essentially just challenges you to think about, where are you going to maybe put a little bit of dollars to help you amplify the message to new audiences? And the reason I encourage you to do that or think about that is, if you're sending out an e-newsletter to everybody who's subscribed to your newsletter, you're messaging to the same community over and over again, right? You're messaging to the people that are already sort of bought into your mission. The paid helps you get to a new audience in the same way that earned media does. If you get a blogger or a podcaster to help invite you onto their podcast so that you can talk about your work, it's introducing you to a new network. And it's that rippling effect out from your current network that's going to be the game changer. If you're just talking to the same people all the time, you're only going to hit a plateau in terms of your ability to grow those private sector partnerships. Same thing, I'll just give you an example with Tracy and I with RBC, the bank across Canada. We had this incredible conversation with one person in one office in one location. And after that, we asked, can you connect us to your colleagues in these other regions? We got 4 or 5 other connections and started doing programming with those other offices, with those other leaders. It's a great example of building multiple champions and really trying to leverage one relationship to build more partnerships with other offices, other geographies within your market. All in all, I'll just wrap this up by saying there's sort of 3 key takeaways, because I know we covered a lot. Is 1, just be super curious. Resist the temptation of going in with leading with what you want and be curious instead. The more curious you are, the more you'll learn. The more you learn, the more likely you are to align to your mission and theirs. Be relevant, to really speak their language and think about how you can bring value in the context of your mission, and build and steward the relationship. So we spend so much time trying to get the relationship in the door. Once you get it in the door, hold on to it tightly and steward and cultivate it on an ongoing basis. Really put a plan in place to be able to do that. All right. Tracy, do we want to transition back to some of our virtual engagement activity tips?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to also speak from I've been a mentoring service provider in my past life, and we were so heavily focused on mentor recruitment for specific programs that is a heavy lift for some individuals to sign up to make that huge commitment to a long-term mentoring relation to a young person. And so when Dan speaks about the low lift and about that engagement, these events, again, I just want to emphasize, really are a gateway. It allows those employees to have an experience and to build out a connection with a young person that you can then reframe to say, okay, so what you just did was mentoring. These are the types of conversations that you could have in an ongoing mentoring relationship with a young person, either with this individual young person, informally, or through a formal mentoring program. And so it really is a nice gateway to allow companies and employees to have an experience and a taste of what mentoring could be for them, and that it's a lot of fun. And so facilitating it and making it an easy experience where they just need to show up and it's that low lift, really allows them to go, oh, maybe I could do this. And that was really great. What are the opportunities that might be available to me to get further involved and to further engage in mentoring with young people, either in my community or in my country or within my city. And we have seen that firsthand from the employees that we've been engaging, that they are reaching out to us and wanting to formalize those relationships or to look at other ways that they could get engaged with young people, or to continue to be a mentor through these types of realms in having conversations with young people. So I just wanted to highlight that for you, that there are opportunities. And as Dan said, it really is the gateway and a path around volunteer engagement, but also corporate engagement. So what are we doing during these events? It's really important to make these events interactive. And so those of you that engage early, you will see that Dan and I use the chat box a lot, and that we narrate that chat box, and that we want people to participate both through written chat, but also verbally. So it's important to play some games during that, to get curious and to tag people, to find out a little bit more about who they are. It's easy in a virtual realm to remain anonymous and just be a bystander, but you really want to engage young people and those employees together to create common ground, that we're all people, and that operating in this virtual sense now and in this platform is new for everybody. And so if you can create that opportunity to say, look, we're all in this together. Yeah, it can feel awkward, but let's get into it, right? And let's have an experience together, that it really does create momentum and a connection that really can mirror an in-person opportunity. Using the chat box, as I said, show and tell. We have some great opportunities where people can show different things from their new work environment behind them and around them, and to speak about them, to speak about their frame of mind, values, what's important to them. Those things are really important. Personalization, it's really important to use people by name, that you notice them, that they're there, that whether they're actively participating or maybe just using the chat, that their participation is noticed and that they are part of an experience together. That's really important. Like we said, interactive games, those both using chat and verbal communication, using the breakout rooms is really important as well, to allow for more intimate conversation and to allow people to really connect and have something a little bit more in depth. Be authentic, be energized when you're facilitating. That creates the pace and that creates the mood within this type of realm.
Two things I just want to add, Tracy. One is, I always say the quote from Maya Angelou that talks about people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget the way you make them feel. And so when you're engaging, especially in these virtual experiences, it's easy just to sort of bring people together and be like, okay, we're going to open up the breakout rooms and have you go in and do these discussions. It's another thing to be able to create an experience where people feel connected, they feel engaged, they feel noticed. And so thinking about, as a facilitator, how you make people feel, what's the takeaway that you want people to have when they experience you in the experience of the activity. The second thing is, I've always asked, like, what are all the things that you can be doing in Zoom and like all those other bells and whistles? And Tracy and I have experimented and found the ones that really work for us in these events. But I always say, at the end of the day, take away all the bells and whistles. It really comes down to the facilitation of the experience, right? Like, if you're not comfortable with the technology or able to integrate all these different elements, just think about how you can bring an energy to the way that you facilitate it, because that energy will ripple out through the people that are participating. And I can't tell you enough, like, we work a lot with Starbucks in Canada. And when you think about all your different events that we've done, the Starbucks team, every single time we engage them, they just bring an energy to the experience, where they're like calling out the young people that they just met in the chat box. When we come back together after breakout rooms, they're like, Tracy, it was so great meeting you. Here's my email, stay in touch. It's just those like little personal touches that really go a long way to making a young person after the event be like, wow, like, I'm not alone in this process. Like, there's a lot of people that I don't even know that are really invested in my success. And so why not take advantage of leveraging those relationships in the journey? Do you want me to cover some of the Zoom tips?
Sure, go right ahead, Dan.
Okay, cool. So these are just a couple of things that I know a number of you said you're pretty comfortable in the Zoom place, but some things that we've learned. So Tracy and I have facilitated, as I mentioned, small groups all the way up to super large groups of well over 100 people. And so the logistics of having, number one, a partner, so Tracy and I tag teaming where we can facilitate the content and facilitate the logistics of moving people into breakout rooms has been super, super important. Ways that we can be efficient in that is we have people when they join just go under the participant list and they rename themselves with an M in front of their name if they're a mentor and a Y in front of their name if they're one of our young leaders. And it enables us on the back end when we break everybody into rooms, it enables you to put all the mentors in the room first and then all the young leaders so you can get a good ratio around the group. Pre-assigning the breakout rooms is something that if you can do that, we recommend having an alphabetized roster of all the young leaders that you're expecting and all the mentors. And if you're doing multiple sessions, when it's alphabetized, it's easier for you to really put people to the second round so they're not doing repeat connections in the second session. It does take a lot of logistics, like I said, because sometimes you have no-shows on both the mentor side and the young leader side. And so being flexible is really important. One thing that I've learned to give us buy us some time, right, is to utilize these short videos. I usually try to find like a 3 to 4 minute video that I can post that's related to the topic. So if we're talking about personal branding, I'll do a video on personal branding that I'll pull up while I'm shuffling people around and trying to get them into the second round with different folks. And so again, using the technology where you post the link in the chat box and you invite them to copy and paste and pull it up on a separate browser can be a good 4-minute window for you. Broadcasting the breakout room instructions. So I always joke, even when you're in person, no matter how many times you explain instructions, the very first question when people jump into breakout rooms is, so what are we supposed to do? So always broadcasting those instructions in the chat box or in the breakout rooms is a way to sort of make sure people are moving in the right direction and giving them time updates, telling them they've got 15 minutes left, 5 minutes, etc. The last thing I'll just mention is recently I started using Google Docs, where similar to what we're going to experience potentially today is sharing a Google Doc link for each breakout room. So you code them, group 1, group 2, group 3, aligned to breakout room 1, breakout room 2, breakout room 3. You share the link and you encourage them to pull it up in their browser. And when they go into their breakout room, have one person share, and then everybody can edit. Everybody can sort of add their own thoughts and perspectives. And what it does for you as a facilitator is you can watch on your Google form which groups need assistance, right? So just like if you were in person and you were moving around the room in a session, you'd be able to see which ones are on track and which ones are not. You're able to see like, oh, there's nothing on this one group's form. Let me jump in and see how they're doing or if they need some assistance, while the other rooms are maybe moving full-fledged forward, and you can monitor that more closely. So just a couple of quick tips that we've learned that might be helpful for the work that you're doing in the virtual space. So we teed up a question here is, how can you ultimately increase private sector engagement and youth mentoring? So we'll throw that out as a question to the team, but I would also say, Tracy and I are more than happy to answer questions that you have regarding any of the content we covered as well. And one of the things that I have found to help them branch from internal to external, meaning work with some of the external partners, has been acknowledge and celebrate all that they've learned in running their internal program by inviting them to serve on a panel. So ask if they would identify 2 of their top mentors and 2 of their top mentees from their internal program, and then invite those 4 to speak to the young leaders that are in your program. And then what they're able to do is form a connection with those young leaders. The questions that your young leaders are asking them, they're able to hear from their internal experience. And what you're wanting to do is spark the connection so that those 4 go back. They become your champions when they go back internal and say, we met these amazing young people and we should do more to support them. Let them drive the internal sales pitch for the idea of working with you externally, by giving them the experience and then immediately giving them the resources. Like, here's all the ways that your team can continue to work with us. Again, thinking low to high effort so that it's an easy it's an easy next step for them. And then you just keep stewarding the relationship over time. That would be the main thing that I would recommend.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. I think if you leverage those internal mentors that are already acting in that role and bring them into an event like a Power of Mentoring event to share that knowledge and that experience with more mentees or young leaders that don't have those connections, it's moving that forward, right? And you're engaging them in work that they're already bought into within their own program, but also leveraging it to expand to more young people.
And I never accept no. So the one thing I would say too is if by chance they say no, we can't do that, then ask if you can interview a few of their mentors and mentees, 15 minutes on a phone call, 10 minutes on a phone call. You can even send in the questions in advance and they could just type you their responses. And then write that interview up and share that with your young leaders and ask your young leaders to reflect on what did they learn from reading the interview responses, and then share that back with the company. So that, again, you're creating an experience for them to share their value. And then you're returning it to them by saying, our young leaders were like blown away with your advice. Like they really thought creatively about how they can apply your advice. And then have the young leaders in some of their responses even ask for an opportunity to do like an informational interview. So let the young leaders sort of build the skill set of being able to self-advocate, to be able to say like, I really appreciate your advice and I'd like to learn more. Could we connect? And you're going to find somebody. You're going to find a few people in that group that are going to say, absolutely, I'll totally connect one-on-one. And then again, let them be your champions internally. I just want to say, just thank you for taking the time to be a part of the session. Thank you for the work that you're all doing on a day-to-day basis. I personally have had more of an opportunity more recently to work on more of a global stage with mentoring, and I'm blown away with just how there's so much compassion among so many people to try to bring these connections to young people especially. And we can learn so much from each other, in addition to just acknowledging how much we all have in common. Like when I'm working with young leaders and employee volunteers from all these different companies and different countries, I'm blown away with the fact that so many of them are just looking for connection. They're just looking for opportunity and for support. And the more we can do that together, we can scale. It's such a different rate versus all of us kind of doing our own thing on our own. And so we definitely are excited about any support we can provide you. Obviously, you have our contact information and feel free to reach out to us. Tracy, I'll kick it back over to you.
Sure. I just want to echo what Dan had to say. I too have had the experience of connecting globally with so many leaders, and certainly we've had the opportunity to host a Power of Mentoring event, two of them, one for Europe and one globally. And those connections that we can make between employees and professionals with youth across not only a country, but globally are just so critical for them in building confidence, looking at opportunities for their future. But the reverse is also really true. Young people today have so much to teach us about their lived experience and where they're experiencing barriers and struggles in entering the workplace that I think as employers, there's much to learn around how to make corporations and our businesses much more attractive to the young leaders that are going to be leading companies in the future. And so they really have been a nice combination of learning together and to bridge those connections, both from a corporate perspective, but also for young people to prepare themselves for work in the future and to look at opportunities. So thank you for joining us. We know that we are all in this together and making our world a better place for young people and building not only support networks for them, but building communities. So thank you for the good work that you're doing. Dan and I are happy to assist you. So please reach out to us. We're happy to give you resources that we use, tricks of the trade, and even just to bounce ideas. So thank you again. I hope you're enjoying the conference, and I may see you in some groups because I'm attending as well.
Thanks, everyone. Take
Thank
care.
you. Have a great day.